out and saying, okay, is this what my organization represents? Is this what we actually do? Is this what our objectives are? What are the things that we actually do, and who owns it? And that's the key thing, is who owns it.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. Today I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Linda Field. She leads the ASG Business Analysis and Process Capability and Community of Practice in SA for ASG. She's also the chairperson of the Adelaide branch of IIBA and is also part of the committee for the IIBA COVID response. Linda, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Real pleasure to be with you today.
Great. Now, for those that may not know what IIBA, it's the International Institute for Business Analysts. Is that correct, Linda?
That's correct, yeah.
Great. So what I might do is I'll pass the ball off to you to maybe give us a more comprehensive introduction. And this is basically just to give our listeners a bit of a grid or a framework for the rest of the interview so that they know a little bit about your background and your experiences and where you're coming from when we're having this conversation. So yeah. I guess starting off with where that interest for BPM first started.
Well, I guess very first started, nearly 25 years ago, I guess. I was working for Qantas at the time, and I was asked to develop their customer relationship management system. And it was one of the first ones that they actually had. And it was moving from a really old DOS-based system. And from there, it was looking at, what's actually, how do we capture that information from the clients and also then bringing that to the frontline staff. So that first started off my interest in processes. As my career went on and I moved out of the travel industry and I went into state government, and I was asked to work on a project for talent management and the recruitment of staff. And the recruitment for staff was taking up to 4 weeks, and it was a real pain point for frontline staff in the government sector in New South Wales. And in having a look at the process and looking at, the life cycle of the recruitment, and sort of, I remember my children at the time were studying the life cycle of a butterfly. Right, and it was really trying to show that to the client so that everything actually has a life cycle, and that's what the terminology we used at the time. And this is going back into the early 2000s. And so I showed them, okay, well, this is what the recruitment life cycle is, and this is where it actually stops. And this was a very simple swim lane diagram, and said, okay, well, this is the time it actually takes. And there's a secretary that's actually holding on to this folder for a week because it's the only that folder only gets to that executive director on a Wednesday. If we actually got that executive director access to that folder so several times during the week, we were able to reduce that turnaround from 4 weeks to 3 weeks, and that was absolutely no technology involvement whatsoever. So that got me really excited in working out ways that there are non-automated ways that we can actually improve people's process and experience and bring more value to frontline staff. Right. Further on to that, working in organizations like, Harvey Norman, and working in other New South Wales state government agencies, and working through those business processes and being able to very simply through people talking and working together, and also some simple things from a systems point of view, able to enable massive cost savings, and that's very exciting. That's very exciting and gratifying to give back in that way.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah.
So for someone that might be listening right now that maybe they're part of an organisation that doesn't have a very mature business process management framework or focus, how would you, now they may have heard of BPM before and maybe a number of different definitions, but how would you define business process management? What would your, I guess, overall description be?
I guess my overall description would be having a knowledge base of the core functions of what your team, department, or organization actually does.
Right.
And having that knowledge management, and being able to check it out and actually have a look at it and saying, okay, is this what my organization represents? Is this what we actually do? Is this what our objectives are? What are the things that we actually do, and who owns it? And that's the key thing, is who owns it. In a current engagement, we're trying to work out who owns it and who owns their processes, which can be obviously sometimes too high level for people to actually understand whether they're a director level. And so divide that up between a process owner versus a custodian, somebody who actually has a more day-to-day approach to the actual processes and have input to that. And then there's an operational level as well. So getting people to actually understand the various levels. And I often draw a very simple diagram of the what of the processes versus the how of the processes. And many organizations have very, very good and detailed documentation and a lot of control over the how things are actually done. All right, so they've got the work instructions. They know how to enter things into the system. They've got their policies and procedures. But when you're looking at a higher level, from an organizational level, people don't often have a clue. They might say, okay, well, somebody is a department head, but they don't realize what that department head, the functions of that department head, and the how it overlaps with other functions.
Right, right. Now, you've obviously been talking about different people within an organisation that might have some responsibility when talking about their business processes, like the process owner or the custodian. Talk to us a little bit about who should care about BPM. Like, is it the CXO level? Is it senior management? Is it the people on the frontline staff? Talk to us a little bit about that.
But I think it's from all levels of the organization. I mean, there's different lenses to it, you know. So that's why I like the BPMN model with the 5 levels, right? At a level 0, you know, that's something that the CTO and the CEO and the CIO needs to be aware of. And then when you start overlaying things like the processes to that, the inputs, the outputs, the stakeholders, and the systems that are actually involved, that really paints a really good picture of the organization as a whole.
Yeah, great. And there are, I mean, I've been talking with a number of different organisations that maybe are using, I guess, have that BPM mindset on a project-to-project basis. They're managing their processes, they're improving their processes, but maybe the organisation haven't really adopted it on an enterprise-wide or maybe even a strategic level. Would you say that a BPM is a strategic tool for an organisation?
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. Looking at what the current state actually is and where they actually want to go to, and things that can actually disrupt their processes. I mean, looking at the virus at this point in time, that could definitely be interrupted the way that they're actually doing things. I've got people on my committee at the moment who are working for one of the large financial institutions who have offshoring processes being done in places that are completely locked down, more so than in Australia. And they're unable to actually achieve that. So they've been able to bring their processes in-house again. So as a result of the virus. Yeah, so that there's so many things. It's a strategic tool. It's to help them with their business continuity plans, you know, processes, well managed and well governed, and people are aware of it, you know, it'll make a difference to them. Some people do take it from project to project and dust them off as a new project comes along, but it's something that should be managed and reviewed either at the enterprise architecture level or business architect level. Yeah.
Great. Now let's go into, I guess, the current climate a little bit more. Obviously, like depending on when people are listening to this interview, right now we are in lockdown, and some organisations are finding the current season very tough. Some organisations have been wiped out altogether, and some organisations are actually thriving in the current climate. But talk to us a little bit about, I guess, continuing to talk about that, about how I guess the management of processes, the documentation of processes, and the continual improvement on processes, why it's so important for the current season, where most employees are working from their own home offices and study, and everything's now digital.
I think if an organization that has a good handle on the processes, preferably documented, not all of them are, they would actually understand where they currently are or were previous to the virus starting, and then how to then pivot and switch as required, whether or not it's changing technology, whether or not it's their reliance on, a VPN, or, there's all sorts of different things that could be impacted as a result of the virus. As I said, people who know their processes and realize their dependencies and the relationships with either externals or outsourced partners, they would be able to switch a lot easier.
Yeah, right. And now, obviously, you've been consulting for a number of years, and you've been working in a range of different organisations that I guess have a different types of challenges and things like that. Talk to us a little bit about process management from the perspective of, I guess, process improvement, optimization, and a little bit about, I guess, the incremental improvements versus those radical innovations where you can take a 13-day process and shorten it down to 3 hours or something like that. But I guess talk to us about that idea of not just documenting the processes, not just having it collect dust, but actually have that continuous management or continuous improvement of those processes.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. When I was in New South Wales working for a government agency and looking at the application process for a funding stream and documenting that, and I really quite like just doing a very simple timeline to start off with and showing clients and showing, okay, well, this is what the application process is, and this is how long it's actually taking, and doing time and motion studies. It does take a bit of time, ironically, but it gives people, operational people in particular, who are very keen on these types of KPIs, and show them how long it actually takes. For this one here, for a government department, it was taking over 40 minutes to do and complete this application through the contact center. And with these changes that were being introduced by government policy and what changes we had to do to the system, we introduced this timeline. And being able to do these very small tweaks in the application, being able to pre-populate some particular fields, being able to bring in a small thing like the Australia Post API to confirm address, validate addresses and things like that. We were able to reduce from 40 minutes down to about 18, right? And in the end, in terms of from a cost savings perspective, working out on an hourly rate and the number of transactions and working out the number of calls and things like that and the costs associated with that, we're able to bring that down quite significantly and work it out to like multi-million dollars a year savings. Wow. Right. Which was a far more than the benefit that we originally projected for that particular project. So things like that, just simple tweaks like that. There was another project also for another government agency where they brought in, it was one of the first IoT projects where, there was sensors reading things from vehicles. And as a result of people having to contact the call center, another call center situation, the search facility in the application was taking so long that the actual call was taking like 12 minutes. And this was to recoup money, which was a very small bit of money, but it was the principle of it.
Right.
And just working together with technology teams to figure out why it was taking so long to refresh. So we indexed the database. We didn't make any other changes other than indexing, and that brought down to 2 minutes. So as a result of that, they had 18 contractors to try to keep up with the volume. They were able to then release those contractors and then able to catch up on the backlog. So simple things like that. And I think in terms of tiny changes like that, when you're sitting down, the power of sitting down with people who actually do the job, it is, it's so worthwhile. And you actually see the pain and frustrations. I remember for that particular project, the team leader wanted to name their firstborn child after me. but yeah.
That's amazing. So with, you're obviously talking about the pain relief that it can provide for those people that are doing the processes. But
yeah.
I guess there might be someone listening right now that they're gleaning a lot from what you're saying, and maybe they're within an organisation that doesn't have much of a focus on process or process management or improvement. Obviously, maybe the person listening, they're not a decision maker. Maybe they're a key influencer, but you've got that senior management or the CXO level that ultimately has the final say. You've been talking about the pain relief there, obviously, for the people that are acting on the processes or carrying them out, conducting them. How would that person approach senior management and I guess pitch the idea of or pitch the value, pitch the return on investment for managing, documenting, improving your business processes? How would they approach that? And then I guess as a follow-up from that, what are some of maybe the objections that they may experience when talking to senior management about BPM initiatives?
Yeah, I think people are familiar with the term lean, right? And it's something, I really like that word lean, because people have got lean budgets these days. They've got, more things to do than the staff that can actually do it. And if you actually just look at the downtime that lean actually has, looking at defects and waste and things like that, I think senior managers can appreciate that. If you just show them very simple Excel of what that actually means in trying to reduce waste and trying to be able to do more, reduce manual paper handling, and the costs associated with that. Reduce the amount of handoffs, reduce the amount of emails that people are actually getting. Senior execs would buy into that. In terms of resistance, I think once you start showing and demonstrating or piloting something and showing the actual benefit of that, people will actually understand. I remember a long time ago when I was working at Qantas, and we were looking at customer service initiatives and also trying to reduce costs. And it wasn't the management that had to be convinced, it was actually the frontline people. And we were looking at ways of trying to reduce, the amount of lost time injuries, right? And one of the things that we had, we actually had a physio actually with the baggage handlers so that they knew how to pick things up and move things around.
Right.
And we actually empowered the baggage handlers and showed them how to do, a fishbone diagram and things like that. And they were then able to realize in all these other areas of waste and also efficiencies. So it actually helped them to save their jobs, so it didn't become outsourced. And we saw with like the physio, for instance, that the LTIs were actually reduced quite significantly. So that was a good thing.
Great. Well, that's good. So talk to me a little bit about, obviously, when documenting processes, improving processes, I'd imagine that, especially when you start talking large organisations with hundreds of thousands of processes, there needs to be, I guess you could say, checks and balances in place, or maybe we could call it process governance.
Yep.
And obviously that provides the right checks and balances, who's documenting these processes, who's reviewing the processes, and then now who's carrying out the processes, and are they actually following them correctly? So talk to us a little bit about, I guess, process governance, and obviously there's that, is it controlling or is it creating the liberty, the freedom with the process management and carrying out the processes? So talk to us a little bit about that.
I think, depending on the organization, and their governance maturity, I mean, Gartner has got a process governance maturity model. And some execs really like seeing these types of frameworks and seeing where they actually are at. And most organizations are at a 1 or 2. And of course, everybody wants to expand and grow on that and improve on it. And from that, I usually develop a schedule as such and activities on how to build that governance in without it being too much of an overhead. And that's the thing. People think governance is an overhead. When you show them that when they're going, especially when they're going through a major transformation program, their life does not stand still while the project is in place, because some of these transformation programs are multi-year. And as a result, during that multi-year, they might be introducing new products, there'll be new services, etc. And when you start showing that and illustrating to them the impacts to their program with the BAU activities, and then potential rework of the project and the costs associated with that buy-in for governance becomes more real. And when you introduce a terms of reference and a simple model of what the governance structure could look like, starting off with the BA and perhaps the enterprise architect, and then it could feed it up to the project committee with the various custodians and owners. And you just make it real, and it's not theoretical, and it's not hard. And it's really with collaboration tools, and it becomes, a seamless process, really. And it is a change, and you have to get that mindset to change for people to think of it in a different way. But when they start realizing that there's people who actually own processes, people feel a little proud of that. They're going, oh, I'm a process owner, and that's really good. And somebody is also the gatekeeper of that process. And I think that elevates their status a little bit internally, but also knowing that they also then have control over it, especially when there's overlapping. And there's very few processes that are just within one team or one department. You go from the call center to the product development team to, accounts payable, et cetera. So people are then aware of their boundaries and be able to work with each other for an improved outcome.
Great. I think that I guess traditionally internally, you would see the org chart, you'd see the organization chart that runs very vertically, but who's looking at the organization from a cross-functional view. I think that's where BPM comes in. And when you do have those process owners, it does make sure that that I guess that process is valued and continually managed and improved. Otherwise, it's not going to, I guess it's just going to be pushed to the side and collect dust, and the people executing the processes will just keep doing what they've always done, but there's no, I guess, sense of accountability or no sense of continuous improvement there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, with the growing role of people in the digital data space, I should say, and there's a lot more executives in that space, and they realize that it starts off with business process, and you need data and architecture and technology, and that they all support each other. And data tells such a story, and without understanding what the process is, the story will be very disjointed. And in one of my current clients, I went in there, I worked there as a contractor 4 years ago, and I developed their processes for them. I came in 4 years later, and I went to look for those processes. I found them, but I also found 2 or 3 other sets that other consultants and contractors have actually developed as well. So one of my, I guess, benefits that I brought to the director was saying, if you do have this governance model in place, you'll be saving, tens of thousands of dollars. So you just can then be able to update it internally as opposed to having these consultants and contractors again and again, And then there's then that frustration level with the custodians and the subject matter experts rolling their eyes going, oh no, not another process workshop. We've done this many times before. So, yeah.
Okay, great. So, Linda, obviously, like from what I can see, you're very well connected and you're very knowledgeable, and you're obviously entrenched in the BPM space, and you know the right people, who to talk to, who to listen to. Talk to us a little bit about, I guess, what the future of process management, process analysis, process improvement, what that's looking like, and what you're, I guess, anticipating it to look like.
I think, RPA becoming more and more the norm. It's not going to be simple, enter this in this field and the field will populate itself. It's going beyond that. It's, chatbots. Everything's going to be completely integrated. It's a very exciting times in the next, 2-3 years. I think business transformation and digital transformation will be nothing compared to the robotic and IoT things that we're going to be taking advantage of. There's heaps of new technologies that are actually coming out and seeing them, and things that used to take forever, everything from petty cash to email management to everything. That we're not going to have to worry about any of that anymore, and it's going to be very exciting times.
Right. Now, for someone that might be listening right now, and obviously we can only cover so very little within 30 minutes. We're just scraping the surface on a couple of ideas and concepts here. But what sort of, if they want to, maybe they come from an organisation that doesn't have a very mature process framework or management, what direction would you point them in if they wanted to go and learn more? Obviously, I'd imagine there's a plethora of resources out there in various different forms. There's talking to key influencers in the industry. There are books and reports and papers and things like that. But maybe talk to us a little bit about where would you direct someone if they came to you and they were like, I want to learn more about BPM.
I think, joining part of the IIBA, I'm gonna spruik that because that's a great place. It's a great place to learn, to network, and to grow. They got great, the BABOK, the body of knowledge, the Bible of BAs. That's a really good start. And I think it's just also, there's the Business Architecture Institute. And just having a play, have a play in processes. Think about, when I'm teaching grads about processes, and I'll get them to just say, okay, what was the process of coming to work? Or tell me the process of getting money out of the ATM, and write that down. And let's look at it and play around with the diagrams with that. Have a look at the BPMN version 2. And there's style guides there that will show you what all the symbols actually mean. And that's a very basic thing to actually do to understand what it is. And start playing around with it. Learning, attending seminars, listening to something like this, the Process Pioneers, and people will get to understand more about business process management.
Great. That sounds awesome. So obviously, guys, as I mentioned before, we've only been able to scrape the surface on a number of different topics here, but I'm sure Linda would be more than happy if you reached out to her and had some questions via email or Zoom, or I'm sure she'd be, and as part of IIBA there, as she mentioned, it's a great resource there, and they've got events all throughout the year, obviously.
That's right.
Outside of lockdown.
Yep.
So please get in touch with Linda if you've enjoyed today's interview and if you want to learn more. Linda, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for asking me to come along.